Black teacher went missing in 1985. 40 years later, workers found this in an old school locker. The fluorescent lights in room 237 cast their familiar harsh glow over empty desks. But something felt different that spring morning in 1985. Ms. Althea Green stood at her blackboard, chalk dust on her fingers, staring at the lesson plan she'd written for her American history class. At 34, she had already become a legend at Lincoln Heights High School, not for fame or fortune, but for the way she could reach the unreachable. "Miss Green sees something in me that nobody else does," 17-year-old Marcus would tell his grandmother that evening, not knowing it would be one of the last times he'd speak about his teacher in the present tense. Althea had arrived at Lincoln Heights 7 years earlier, fresh out of graduate school with a master's degree in education and fire in her belly. The school sat in the heart of the city's most neglected neighborhood, where broken streetlights watched over broken dreams, and where most teachers transferred out within 2 years. But Althea stayed. She saw potential where others saw problems. Her classroom was different from the others. While most teachers hung generic motivational posters, Althea's walls told stories. Pictures of Frederick Douglass sat beside photographs of her students at the science fair. Booker T. Washington's quotes shared space with college acceptance letters from former students who'd beaten the odds. She knew every student's name, their struggles, their dreams. More importantly, she made them believe those dreams were possible. "Education is the great equalizer," she would tell her classes, her voice carrying the weight of conviction. "But only if it's fair. Only if everyone gets the same chance." But in the weeks leading up to that fateful morning, something had changed in Althea Green. Students noticed it first, the way she would stop mid-sentence during lessons, her eyes distant, as if calculating some invisible equation. She started staying late, long after the custodial staff had gone home, her classroom light the only beacon in the darkened school. Janelle Thompson, then a 15-year-old sophomore in Althea's world history class, remembered the change vividly even decades later. "She used to joke with us, tell us stories about the past that made it come alive," Janelle would recall. "But those last few weeks she seemed scared. Like she was carrying a secret too heavy for one person to bear." The change wasn't just in her demeanor. Althea had acquired a new habit. She kept a worn leather briefcase chained to her wrist, and she guarded it like it contained the crown jewels. When curious students asked about it, she would smile that warm, motherly smile that had comforted so many over the years, but her eyes would dart to the door as if expecting someone unwelcome to walk through it. "Just some extra papers, baby," she would say, patting the briefcase. "Nothing for you to worry about." But Althea Green was worrying enough for everyone. She had started arriving at school before dawn, using her master key to access areas where most teachers never ventured. The administrative offices, the budget room, the principal's suite, places where secrets lived in filing cabinets and ledgers. She would take photographs with a small camera she kept hidden in her purse, documenting things that made her hands shake as she worked. The other teachers noticed her transformation too. Mrs. Patterson, who taught next door, would later tell investigators that Althea had approached her in early May with a strange request. "She asked me if I'd ever noticed anything odd about the funding for our programs," Mrs. Patterson recalled. "She wanted to know if I knew why the supplies for the advanced placement classes were always pristine while the regular classes made do with textbooks from the 1960s. When I said I figured that's just how it was, she got this look in her eyes, like I'd just confirmed her worst fear." The last week of May 1985 brought an unseasonable chill to the city, and with it, a tension that seemed to permeate the hallways of Lincoln Heights High. Althea's behavior became even more erratic. She would glance over her shoulder constantly, and she had started walking students to the bus stop after school, something she'd never done before. "She told me to be careful walking home," remembered Keisha Williams, one of Althea's brightest students. "She said there were people who didn't want kids like us to succeed, and that I should never let anyone convince me I wasn't smart enough for college." It felt like she was saying goodbye, but I didn't understand why. On the evening of May 29, 1985, Althea worked later than usual. The security guard, Mr. Peterson, would later tell police that he'd seen her light on until well past midnight. She was photocopying documents, he said, stack after stack of papers that she fed through the machine with methodical precision. When he knocked to check on her, she quickly gathered everything up and locked it all in her briefcase. "Good night, Mr. Peterson," she had said, her voice steady but her hands trembling as she secured the chain around her wrist. "Take care of yourself." Those were the last words anyone at Lincoln Heights High School heard Althea Green speak. The next morning, room 237 stood empty. No lesson plans on the board, no inspirational quote written in Althea's distinctive handwriting, no warm smile to greet students as they filed in for first period. Just empty desks and the lingering scent of chalk dust that seemed to ask a question no one could answer. Where was Ms. Green? Principal Walker called for a substitute and sent word to the district office. By noon, the official story had crystallized with suspicious speed. Ms. Althea Green had resigned effective immediately and relocated out of state for personal reasons. No forwarding address. No goodbye to students who adored her. No explanation for why she would abandon her calling just weeks before summer break. But in her small apartment across town, Althea's coffee cup still sat on the kitchen table, half full and cold. Her bed was unmade, as if she'd planned to return that very evening. Her car keys hung on the hook by the door, and her purse sat on the dresser, everything except the leather briefcase that had become her constant companion. The students were devastated. They organized petitions, demanding to know where their beloved teacher had gone. They called the district office, wrote letters to the newspaper, even showed up at school board meetings. But their voices were dismissed as the dramatic overreactions of teenagers who simply couldn't accept that their favorite teacher had moved on. Slowly, systematically, Althea Green began to disappear from Lincoln Heights High School. Her name was removed from the staff directory within a week. By the end of summer, her photograph had been taken down from the faculty wall. When the new school year began, it was as if she had never existed at all. But Janelle Thompson remembered. Even as she grew older, graduated, and moved away to college, she never forgot the teacher who had believed in her when no one else would. She never forgot the fear in Ms. Green's eyes during those final weeks. And she never believed the official story about a resignation that came without warning, without explanation, and without goodbye. Years would pass. Decades would turn like pages in a history book. Lincoln Heights High School would see new teachers come and go, new students chase new dreams, new scandals that would quickly be forgotten. But somewhere in the shadows of that institution, a secret waited to be discovered. A secret that would prove Janelle Thompson's instincts had been right all along. A secret that would reveal the true fate of Ms. Althea Green, and the courage of a woman who had been willing to risk everything for the students she loved. 40 years later, the sledgehammer crashed into the faculty lounge wall with a thunderous boom that echoed through the empty corridors of Lincoln Heights High School. Construction worker Tommy Martinez paused to wipe sweat from his forehead, squinting at the dust cloud that had erupted from the impact. "This wall's been here since the Carter administration," he called out to his partner, Rico. "Built like a fortress." The school district had finally approved the long-overdue renovation project for Lincoln Heights. What had once been the most neglected high school in the city was getting a second chance. New classrooms, updated technology, and a complete overhaul of the faculty areas. It was 2025, and the building that had housed decades of dreams and disappointments was being transformed. Tommy swung the sledgehammer again, and this time, the old drywall gave way completely. But instead of revealing the expected plumbing or electrical work, a hidden space appeared, a narrow alcove that had been sealed off and forgotten. "Rico, come look at this," Tommy called, shining his flashlight into the darkness. The beam of light illuminated something unexpected, a row of old lockers, their green paint peeling and their metal surfaces eaten through with rust. These weren't the student lockers that lined the hallways. These were smaller, older, and clearly hadn't been opened in decades. "Must be the original faculty lockers," Rico said, joining his partner. "From back when this place was first built." One locker in particular caught Tommy's attention. Unlike the others, its lock was completely corroded, and the door hung slightly ajar. Through the gap, He could see something inside, papers, maybe books. After 40 years in construction, Tommy had learned that old buildings held their secrets close. But this felt different. "Should we call the supervisor?" Rico asked. Tommy was already reaching for the locker door. "Let's see what we got first." The door opened with a screech of protest, and both men stepped back as a musty smell wafted out, the scent of old paper and time itself. Inside, the contents had been remarkably preserved by the sealed space. Tommy's flashlight revealed a collection that made no sense. A worn leather ledger, yellowed with age, sat beside a stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon. But most puzzling of all was what lay next to them, a small black device that definitely didn't belong in a locker from the 1980s. "Is that a flash drive?" Rico asked, incredulous. Tommy carefully extracted the items, handling them like archaeological artifacts. The ledger felt heavy in his hands, its leather cover cracked but intact. The letters were addressed in careful handwriting, and he could make out the initials, AG, in the corner of several envelopes. "We need to call someone about this," Tommy said. "This isn't construction debris." An hour later, Janelle Rhodes stood in the dusty alcove, her heart pounding as she stared at the contents spread across a makeshift table. As the newest English teacher at Lincoln Heights High, she had volunteered to help catalog any historical items found during the renovation. But she never expected to find anything like this. The name on the work order had caught her attention immediately. She was back at her old high school, the place where she'd spent some of the most formative years of her life. At 35, Janelle had returned to Lincoln Heights with a mission: to give back to the community that had shaped her, to be the kind of teacher who made a difference. But now, holding the brittle leather ledger in her hands, she felt transported back to her sophomore year, to room 237, and to the teacher who had vanished without explanation. "These letters," she whispered, carefully untying the ribbon. "They're signed AG." The first letter she opened made her hands tremble. "If something happens to me, know that I tried to do what was right. The children deserve better. They deserve the truth. The numbers don't lie, even when the people in charge do. I've documented everything. Someone has to speak for those who have no voice. AG." Janelle sank into a nearby chair, her mind racing. Could this be? After all these years, could this actually be from Ms. Althea Green? She opened the ledger carefully, and her breath caught. Page after page of meticulous handwriting filled the book, dates, dollar amounts, budget codes, and notes that grew increasingly desperate as she read on. May 15, 1985 confirmed discrepancy in Title I funding. $47,000 allocated for tutoring programs for at-risk students. Only $12,000 actually spent on programs. Where did the rest go? May 18, 1985 AP program receives brand new textbooks worth $15,000. Regular classes still using books from 1967. Coincidence that AP classes are 89% white while regular classes are 76% black and Hispanic? May 22, 1985 overheard conversation between Principal Walker and board member Harrison. "Those people don't need the same resources," Harrison said. "They're not college material anyway." Walker agreed. "They're stealing from our children." Janelle's vision blurred with tears of rage and recognition. This was it. This was why Ms. Green had been so frightened, so secretive. She had discovered something monstrous. But then Janelle's eyes fell on the flash drive again, and confusion returned. The ledger was clearly from 1985, but flash drives hadn't been invented until the late 1990s. How could both items be in the same locker? She picked up the small black device, turning it over in her palm. It was modern, no more than a few years old. Someone had been in this locker recently. Someone had added to whatever Ms. Green had left behind. The implications hit her like a physical blow. If someone had access to this locker, if someone had been adding evidence over the years, then the corruption Ms. Green had discovered might still be happening. The theft from underprivileged students might have continued for decades. And if that was true, then whoever had silenced Althea Green 40 years ago might still be out there. Janelle looked around the empty alcove, suddenly feeling exposed and vulnerable. But she also felt something else. The same fire that had driven her favorite teacher to risk everything for her students. She carefully gathered the letters, the ledger, and the mysterious flash drive. Whatever secrets this collection held, whatever dangerous truth had cost Althea Green everything, Janelle was going to uncover it. Even if it ended her. The coffee shop 3 blocks from Lincoln Heights buzzed with the usual morning rush, but Janelle's attention was fixed on the laptop screen in front of her. She had barely slept since discovering the locker contents 2 days ago, her mind churning with possibilities and fears. The flash drive sat beside her coffee cup like a small black promise, or threat. Taking a deep breath, she inserted it into her laptop's USB port. The drive contained dozens of files, all meticulously organized in folders labeled by year: 1985, 1987, 1992, 1998, 2003, 2008, 2015, 2020, 2024. Someone had been documenting corruption at Lincoln Heights for nearly 40 years, adding evidence piece by piece, building a case that no one had ever seen. Janelle clicked on the most recent folder and gasped. Scanned budget documents filled her screen, official school district paperwork that showed the same patterns Althea Green had discovered in 1985, but on a much larger scale. Millions of dollars allocated for programs serving low-income students had been systematically diverted elsewhere. A handwritten note was clipped to one document. New administration, same theft. They think we don't notice, but someone is always watching. A friend of AG. Holy shit. She whispered, then looked around the coffee shop apologetically. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You're not safe looking at that alone. Faculty parking lot, 3 p.m. Blue Honda Civic. Come alone. Someone who wants the truth to come out. Janelle's hands shook as she read the message. Someone knew she had found the evidence. Someone had been watching her. But before she could spiral into panic, a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. Janelle Rhodes? From Mrs. Patterson's English class? She looked up to see Noah Pritchard, a tall man with kind eyes and graying temples. She recognized him immediately. He had been a few years ahead of her at Lincoln Heights and was now one of the history teachers. Noah! Yes, hi, she said, quickly closing the laptop. How are you? I'm good. Mind if I sit? I saw you from across the room and, well, you look like you've seen a ghost. Something in his expression made her pause. There was concern there, but also a knowing look that made her wonder if this meeting was as coincidental as it seemed. Actually, Noah continued, lowering his voice, I heard about what they found during the renovation. The old locker. Janelle's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. How did you? Word travels fast in a school. Plus, I've been waiting 40 years for someone to find whatever Althea Green left behind. The name hung in the air between them like a confession. Noah glanced around the coffee shop, then leaned closer. I was a student teacher in 1985, he said quietly. Fresh out of college, full of idealism. Althea Green was my mentor. She was brilliant, dedicated, and she was terrified during those last few weeks. Janelle set down her cup. You knew her? She tried to tell me what she'd discovered, but I was too young, too naive to understand. I thought she was being paranoid when she said the district was stealing from the students. When she disappeared, I convinced myself the official story was true. But I never stopped wondering. Noah's eyes grew distant. Over the years, I started noticing things. Budget inconsistencies, programs that existed on paper but not in reality, resources that were supposed to help our neediest students but somehow never materialized. I started keeping my own records. Wait, Janelle said, her heart racing. The flash drive. That was you? Noah nodded slowly. I found that locker by accident 5 years ago during a late-night search for old files. When I saw Althea's ledger, I knew I had to continue her work. I've been adding evidence ever since, hoping someday someone would find it all and have the courage to do what she couldn't. Janelle opened her laptop again, showing him the files. Noah, This is incredible. But it's also terrifying. These documents implicate people who are still in power. I know, he said grimly. Principal Walker retired, but his protege, Dr. Harrison, the current superintendent, he's the son of the board member Althea wrote about. The corruption runs in the family, literally. They spent the next hour going through the evidence together. Noah explained how he'd learned to decode budget documents, how to spot the paper trails that led to theft, how to document the systematic discrimination that had robbed generations of students. But why didn't you come forward yourself? Janelle asked. Noah's laugh was bitter. I tried once. In 2010, I presented some evidence to the state education department. Suddenly, my teaching evaluations went from excellent to unsatisfactory. I was nearly fired for performance issues that had never existed before. I learned to be more careful after that. So we worked together, Janelle said, feeling a surge of determination. 2 teachers are harder to silence than 1. It's dangerous, Janelle. Look what happened to Althea. That's exactly why we have to do this. She sacrificed everything to expose the truth. We can't let that sacrifice be meaningless. Noah studied her face, seeing the same fire that had burned in Althea Green's eyes 4 decades earlier. Okay, he said finally. But we do this smart. We make copies of everything, we document our every move, and we tell other people what we're doing so if something happens. Nothing's going to happen, Janelle interrupted, though her voice carried more confidence than she felt. They spent another hour creating a plan. They would digitize all of Althea's original documents, cross-reference them with Noah's modern evidence, and build an unshakable case. They would approach journalists, state investigators, and civil rights organizations simultaneously, making the story too big to suppress. As they prepared to leave, Noah grabbed her arm gently. Janelle, there's something else. The text you got this morning, about meeting someone in the parking lot? She stared at him. How did you know about that? Because I didn't send it. Which means someone else knows you have the evidence. Someone who's been watching you since you found that locker. The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm, too exposed. Janelle looked around at the other customers, wondering if any of them were paying too much attention to their conversation. What do we do? She whispered. We stick together, Noah said firmly. And we move fast. Because if they're already making contact, it means we're running out of time. As they packed up their things, either teacher noticed a man in the corner booth who had been listening to every word, his phone already dialing a number that would set deadly events in motion. The first warning came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Janelle discovered it when she walked to her car in the faculty parking lot, 4 slashed tires and a note tucked under the windshield wiper, written in block letters. Let the past die. Her hands trembled as she photographed the note with her phone before calling Noah. Within minutes he was beside her, his face grim as he surveyed the damage. This is escalating faster than I expected, he said, glancing around the empty parking lot. Someone's getting desperate. But it was the email waiting in Janelle's inbox that truly chilled her blood. The sender was listed simply as a friend, and the message was brief. Ms. Green thought she was safe too. Stop digging or join her. We need to go to the police, Noah said after reading it. And tell them what? That we think a 40-year-old crime is connected to budget fraud? They'll think we're conspiracy theorists. Then we need more proof. Something concrete that even the police can't ignore. Their breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While researching property records online, trying to trace financial connections between the school district and local contractors, Janelle discovered something that made her heart race. Eugene Peterson, the security guard who had been working at Lincoln Heights in 1985, was still alive. Not only alive, but living in a retirement home just 20 minutes away. He was the last person to see Althea alive at the school, Janelle said, showing Noah the address. If anyone knows what really happened that night. Sunset Manor retirement home smelled of disinfectant and memories. Eugene Peterson, now 83, sat in a wheelchair by the window of the common room, his eyes cloudy but alert. When Janelle introduced herself as a teacher from Lincoln Heights, his weathered face immediately darkened. "I wondered when someone would finally come asking about that night," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Been carrying that weight for 40 years. "What happened, Mr. Peterson?" Janelle asked gently. "What did you see?" Eugene's hands shook as he reached for a glass of water. "Miss Green, she was a good woman. Cared about those kids more than anyone had a right to. But she got herself into something dangerous." He paused, looking around the room as if checking for eavesdroppers, a habit that apparently hadn't faded even after decades. "That last night, May 29th, she stayed late like usual. But around 11 p.m., I saw a car pull up, black sedan plates, I remember that. 2 men got out, went straight to the main entrance like they had keys." Noah leaned forward. "Did you recognize them?" "One of them was board member Harrison, big man, expensive suit, acted like he owned the place. The other one, I'd seen him around, district office type. They went straight to Miss Green's classroom." Eugene's voice grew even quieter. "I heard shouting. Angry voices. Miss Green was scared, I could tell, but she wasn't backing down. I heard her say something about the children deserve better, and I won't let you steal from them anymore." Janelle felt tears stinging her eyes. Even facing danger, Althea had been fighting for her students. "Then what happened?" she asked. The voices got quieter. "I thought maybe they'd work things out. But around midnight, I saw them carrying something heavy out the back door. Something wrapped in plastic sheeting." Eugene's voice broke. "I should have called the police right then. But Harrison saw me watching from the window. Next day, I got a visit from 2 men who said I'd lose my job and my pension if I ever mentioned seeing anything that night." "Oh my God!" Janelle whispered. "They finished her. I've lived with that guilt for 40 years. Eugene continued. "When they announced she'd resigned and moved away, I knew it was a lie. But I was scared. I had a wife, grandchildren. I convinced myself maybe she really had just left town." Noah was taking notes frantically. "Mr. Peterson, would you be willing to make an official statement? To go on record with what you saw?" The old man was quiet for a long moment. "I'm 83 years old. What are they gonna do to me now? Yes, I'll tell anyone who'll listen. That woman deserved better." As they prepared to leave, Eugene grabbed Janelle's arm with surprising strength. "There's something else. About a week after Miss Green disappeared, I found something in the faculty lounge. A key, hidden behind one of the vending machines. I kept it all these years, figured it might be important someday." He pulled a small brass key from his wallet, one smoothed by decades of handling. "Never could figure out what it opened, but Miss Green was always careful about keeping her important things locked up." Janelle stared at the key, her mind racing. "Mr. Peterson, do you think this might open something other than the locker we found?" "Could be. That woman was smart. If she was really documenting corruption, she might have hidden evidence in more than one place." Driving back to the school, Janelle and Noah were both quiet, processing the enormity of what they'd learned. Eugene's testimony proved that Althea Green had been finished, but it also confirmed their worst fears about how dangerous their own investigation had become. "The current superintendent Harrison," Noah said finally. "He's the son of the board member Eugene identified. This conspiracy has been passed down like a family business. And if they finish Althea to keep her quiet..." Janelle didn't finish the sentence. Her phone buzzed with another email from a friend. "Talked to any old security guards lately? Some secrets are worth finishing for. Last warning, they were being watched." Every move, every conversation, every step they took toward the truth brought them closer to the same fate that had befallen Althea Green. But as they pulled into the Lincoln Heights parking lot, Janelle felt something she hadn't expected, determination rather than fear. 40 years ago, Althea had faced this same danger alone. She had died trying to protect her students from thieves and racists who saw them as less than human. "We're not backing down," Janelle said firmly. "Althea died for this truth. We're going to make sure it sees the light of day." Noah nodded, though his face was pale. "Then we'd better move fast. Because they're not going to wait much longer to stop us. As they walked toward the school building, either of them noticed the black sedan parked across the street, or the two men inside who were making plans of their own. The key Eugene Peterson had given them opened something neither Janelle nor Noah had expected to find, a safety deposit box at First National Bank downtown. Althea Green had been thorough in her preparation for the worst. Inside the box lay the smoking gun, original budget documents with handwritten notes in the margins, signed confessions from contractors who had been pressured to inflate costs and kick back money to district officials, and photographs of cash being exchanged in parking lots. Most damning of all was a letter addressed to whoever finds this. Dated May 28, 1985, the day before Althea disappeared. I know they will try to silence me, but the truth cannot be buried forever. The children of Lincoln Heights deserve justice, and someone must speak for them when I cannot. The evidence is here. Use it wisely. Use it for them. Althea Green. This is it, Janelle whispered, her voice thick with emotion. This is everything we need. Noah carefully photographed each document, while Janelle contacted Maria Santos, an investigative journalist from the city paper who had been following education corruption stories for years. They also reached out to the State Education Board and the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. Within 48 hours, the story exploded across local and national media. Teacher finished for exposing 40-year corruption scheme, screamed the headlines. News trucks lined up outside Lincoln Heights High School, and reporters thrust microphones at anyone connected to the district. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showed that over 4 decades, more than $12 million intended for programs serving low-income students had been systematically stolen. The money had funded everything from personal vacations for administrators to inflated contracts for board members' businesses. But the district's response was swift and vicious. By the end of the week, Janelle found herself called into Principal Martinez's office, where Superintendent Dr. James Harrison, son of the board member who had finished Althea, sat with a team of lawyers. Ms. Rhodes, Dr. Harrison said, his voice cold and calculated. The district is deeply concerned about these wild accusations you've been making. Our investigation shows that the documents you claim to have found are fabrications. That's impossible, Janelle said. We have the originals, authenticated by experts. What you have, interrupted one of the lawyers, are sophisticated forgeries created to defame this district. We believe you and Mr. Pritchard conspired to create these documents in an attempt to gain fame and financial compensation. Janelle felt the room spinning. You can't be serious. Dr. Harrison leaned forward, his eyes as cold as his father's had been 40 years earlier. Effective immediately, you're suspended pending a full investigation into your conduct. We've also filed complaints with the State Teaching Board questioning your fitness for the classroom. The media won't believe that. The evidence speaks for itself. The media, Dr. Harrison smiled, will believe what we tell them. We've already provided them with documentation showing your history of mental health issues and your tendency toward conspiracy theories. Janelle's blood ran cold. What mental health issues? What documentation? The psychological evaluation you underwent after your father's death when you were 16. The grief counseling, the depression medication. All perfectly understandable, but it does raise questions about your current stability. They had weaponized her teenage trauma, twisted her need for help into evidence of instability. Within hours, the narrative began to shift. News reports started referring to troubled teachers and fabricated evidence. Social media buzzed with doubt about Janelle's credibility. Noah faced similar attacks. His teaching record was scrutinized, past student complaints were resurrected and magnified, and suddenly he was portrayed as a disgruntled employee with a grudge against the district. But the tide began to turn when Maria Santos received an unexpected phone call. This is Robert Harrison, the voice said. I need to speak with you about the Lincoln Heights story. Robert Harrison was Dr. James Harrison's uncle, a former school board member who had served alongside his brother Thomas, the man Eugene Peterson had seen arguing with Althea Green. Now 78 and dying of cancer, Robert Harrison had watched the news coverage with growing horror. "I can't take this to my grave," he told Maria during their recorded interview. "My brother Thomas and his son James, they've been stealing from those kids for decades. And when that teacher, Miss Green, got too close to the truth, Thomas had her finished." The confession sent shockwaves through the investigation. Robert Harrison provided details that only someone with inside knowledge could know. He explained how the corruption network operated, how officials were bribed, how evidence was destroyed, and how witnesses were silenced. Most importantly, he confirmed Eugene Peterson's account of the night Althea died. "Thomas called me that night," Robert said, his voice barely audible. "He was panicking, said the teacher had evidence that could destroy them all. He said they had to handle it. I thought he meant bribing her or threatening her job. I never thought he'd actually end her." "Why are you coming forward now?" Maria asked. "Because I've been watching my nephew destroy evidence and threaten witnesses just like his father did. And because I see that young teacher on the news, being destroyed the same way they destroyed Miss Green. I won't let history repeat itself." The confession changed everything. Dr. Harrison's carefully constructed narrative crumbled as federal investigators opened a formal probe. The fabricated mental health records were exposed as forgeries, and the systematic character assassination of Janelle and Noah was revealed as part of the cover-up. Within days, Dr. James Harrison and 3 other district officials were arrested on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The 40-year-old case was reopened with new evidence. But for Janelle, vindication came with a price. The stress of the investigation, the public attacks on her character, and the weight of uncovering such a massive conspiracy had taken their toll. She found herself unable to sleep, jumping at every unexpected sound, and constantly looking over her shoulder. "It's not over," she told Noah as they watched the news coverage of the arrests. "Robert Harrison said there was someone else involved, someone whose name was redacted in Althea's notes. The mastermind behind all of this is still out there." Noah nodded grimly. "And now they know we're not going to stop until we find them." As if summoned by their words, Janelle's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You've done well, but the real power behind this conspiracy runs deeper than you know. One name remains hidden for a reason. Some secrets are worth protecting. The Last Guardian." Looking out the window at the media circus surrounding the school, Janelle realized that their fight for justice was far from over. Somewhere in the shadows, the true architect of 4 decades of corruption was still pulling strings, still protecting their secret. And Althea Green's passing was just the beginning of a web of deceit that stretched far beyond Lincoln Heights High School. The final piece of the puzzle came from the most unexpected source, a construction worker's keen eye and a 40-year-old concrete pour. When state investigators followed Robert Harrison's confession, they began searching for Althea Green's body. The dying board member had revealed that his brother Thomas had buried her somewhere she'd never be found, but hadn't known the exact location. It was Tommy Martinez, the same construction worker who had found the locker, who provided the crucial lead. While reviewing old building permits for the investigation, he noticed something odd about the concrete work done on the school's foundation in June 1985, just weeks after Althea's disappearance. "That section was poured at night," Tommy told investigators. "I've been in construction 40 years. Nobody pours foundation concrete at night unless they're trying to hide something." Ground-penetrating radar confirmed Tommy's suspicions. Beneath the concrete slab behind the school gymnasium, investigators found human remains that DNA testing confirmed belonged to Althea Green. She had been there all along, buried beneath the very school she had died trying to protect. The discovery triggered a massive investigation that reached far beyond Lincoln Heights. Robert Harrison's deathbed confession had mentioned a puppet master, someone who controlled the corruption network from the shadows, someone whose identity had been carefully protected for decades. That someone turned out to be City Council member Margaret Whitfield, a woman who had spent 30 years positioning herself as a champion of education reform while secretly orchestrating the theft of millions in education funding. The redacted name in Althea's final notes had been hers. Whitfield had built her legal career on promises to improve inner-city schools while simultaneously ensuring those schools remained underfunded and failing. The worse the schools performed, the more federal and state money flowed in, money that she and her network diverted to their own pockets. She was untouchable. Robert Harrison had told investigators in his final interview before his death. A black woman in state affairs advocating for education, who would suspect her of stealing from her own community? It was the perfect cover. The FBI's investigation revealed that Whitfield's network had stolen over $30 million across multiple school districts over 4 decades. The money had funded lavish lifestyles, campaign contributions, and bribes that reached into his office. When federal agents arrested Whitfield at her campaign headquarters, they found her shredding documents. 40 years of corruption condensed into filing cabinets that she was desperately trying to destroy. The trials that followed dominated headlines for months. Dr. James Harrison received 25 years for fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to this. 3 other district officials received sentences ranging from 10 to 15 years. Margaret Whitfield, convicted on racketeering charges, was sentenced to life in prison. But the most meaningful moment came on a warm September morning when the school board voted unanimously to rename Lincoln Heights High School. "It is with great honor and profound respect," announced board president Sarah Chin, "that we dedicate this institution as Althea Green High School, in memory of a teacher who gave her life protecting her students' right to a fair education." Janelle stood at the podium in the packed auditorium, looking out at faces both familiar and new. Students, teachers, parents, and community members had gathered to witness justice finally served. Ms. Althea Green believed that education was the great equalizer, Janelle said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. She died because she refused to let anyone steal that equality from her students. Today, we honor her sacrifice by ensuring it will never happen again. The Althea Green Memorial Scholarship was established with funds recovered from the corruption network. Money that would finally serve its intended purpose of helping underprivileged students attend college. The first recipient was Marcus Williams, the same student who had spoken so fondly of Ms. Green in 1985 and who was now a grandfather himself. "She saw something in me that nobody else did," Marcus said through tears at the ceremony. 40 years later, she's still changing lives. Noah was promoted to head of the history department and tasked with developing a curriculum about civil rights and social justice that would ensure future students understood the importance of speaking truth to power. Janelle was not only reinstated but appointed as the school's first director of educational equity, charged with preventing corruption and ensuring fair treatment for all students. But even as they celebrated these victories, Janelle kept one secret locked in her desk drawer, the final page of Althea's ledger, the one she had never shown investigators. On it, in Althea's careful handwriting, was a single name that had been crossed out so thoroughly it was illegible, followed by a note. "Some secrets die with those who keep them. But truth has a way of surviving." Beneath that, in different handwriting, the same hand that had added evidence to the locker over the years, someone had written, "The work continues. There are other schools, other students who need protection. AG's mission lives on." As Janelle sat in her new office in the renamed school, watching students walk down hallways that had once echoed with corruption and cover-ups, she understood that Althea Green's legacy was not just about the justice they had achieved. It was about the vigilance required to protect that justice for generations to come. The final secret might remain hidden, but the truth had indeed survived. And in the classrooms of Althea Green High School, a new generation of students was learning that sometimes the most important lesson of all is that one person willing to stand up for what's right can change the world, even if it takes 40 years for that change to come.